You're listening to Systemic Error Podcast. The failure was designed.
I'm sad at Trump's cuts backfire as red states forced to scrap America 250 festivities based on an article by Daniel Hampton. Trump starves local history to feed his capital vanity. The real budget cut. Small-town libraries, historical societies, and humanities councils were not the problem. They were the target. According to NOTUS, DOGE cut federal funding for state humanities councils, and the damage landed exactly where it always lands first, in the thin civic infrastructure that keeps local history, civics, and public memory alive. Trumbull County had to shrink a modest passport project. West Virginia had scrapped semiquincentennial plans. The story is not about belt-tightening. It is about a presidential administration deciding that shared civic life is dispensable unless it can be repurposed into spectacle. Power decides what America 250 means. The councils exist because Congress created them around the 1976 bicentennial to support small-scale history and civics work in nearly every state and territory that matters. These are not ornamental grants. They are the mechanism by which national commemoration reaches beyond elite institutions and into counties, museums, and community centers. The administration has now let Congress fund them at normal levels for fiscal 2026, while disbursing less than half and telling them not to expect the rest. That is not confusion. That is executive power used to override legislative intent without formally admitting it. The misdirection is the point. The public-facing story is celebration. The governing reality is extraction. Trump's team took money away from local cultural work and funneled attention and resources toward his own beautification projects in Washington, including the Great American State Fair and a planned triumphal arch. That is the governing logic in plain sight. Strip the periphery, stage the center, and call the result patriotism. The article's framing is useful insofar as it reports the theft, but it still risks softening the mechanism by presenting it as a funding lapse rather than what it is, a deliberate political choice. What gets cut first? West Virginia's Humanities Council said the people who got hurt were the small organizations doing cultural work in regional centers, community centers, small museums, and county historical associations. That is the tell. Authoritarian politics does not usually begin by attacking the biggest and most visible institutions. It hollows out the local connective tissue first, because local organizations cannot hire fleets of lobbyists or survive long without predictable public support. A small historical society printing fewer booklets may look minor. It is not. It is how civic capacity is starved one small wound at a time. Congress funded it. The White House withheld it. The separation of powers problem here is not abstract. Congress funded the councils. The administration withheld the money. The Federation of State Humanities Councils has asked a federal judge in Oregon to say so. That lawsuit is doing the work the political press too often avoids, naming the conflict as a power grab, not a bureaucratic misunderstanding. When an administration can ignore appropriated funds and redirect political energy toward vanity monuments, the issue is not poor management. It is contempt for the institutions that are supposed to constrain presidential whim. The pattern. This is what democratic decay looks like in practical terms: public goods cut loose from the people they serve, local institutions left to shrink in silence, and national identity rooted into personal branding for the man in the Oval Office. The councils were built to make history accessible beyond Washington. Trump's project is to empty out that pluralism and replace it with spectacle that flatters him. The country does not lose only money in that arrangement. It loses the habit of seeing itself as more than one man's stage set. You've been listening to Systemic Error. Thanks to Roar's story for today's article with the automated voice of Kristen. Thanks for listening.